right. Welcome in, everybody, to Let's Talk Live here on the LTL Media Channel. Wow. It just seems every time I made my post, a couple of weeks ago, I said, hey, I feel like things are concluding here in the Karen Reed case. And it feels like every time I go to start something else happens in the Karen Reed case. And I know that people are going to say, oh, well, you made the post and said you're moving on. Yeah, but I also said in that post, too, if anything relevant came up in her case or anything that's relevant to Turtle Boy's case, we're going to talk about it. So we're going to have a great conversation tonight. I hope everybody had a happy 4th of July. Mine was very low key. I hung out. I relaxed. I was Brian for a couple of days, not LTL. And I said to my audience, I said to all of you guys, I said, I'm probably not going to be around for a couple of days. I'm going to take a couple of days off because I'm going to be going back to work on Thursday. Well, guess what? We're here because some news dropped tonight. And I'm going to bring in two amazing people. The three amigos are back together. I'm very, very excited about this. Let's bring in my fabulous guests this evening. The one and only Mass State Police, retired Mass State Police Todd McGhee. And we have the one and only Attorney Nan Gallagher. Three amigos back together. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing
You
great.
guys hear me?
I cannot hear Todd.
All right, hang on one second.
Hold on. I got thrown off of your backstage right before.
Let me see. Can't unmute your guests because they have choose to mute themselves. You got to unmute yourself, Todd.
There you go.
Todd, how are you?
Awesome. Good to see you both.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an LTL show if we didn't start off with some technical difficulties because
we can fix it.
It always happens. But welcome back in. Look at we're up here live once again, the three amigos, and we just had some breaking news that dropped today. We heard Karen Reed's now added some attorneys to her civil suit, beefing up her chances here against the civil liabilities that the O'Keefes and are trying to bring against her and the Waterfall and CF McCarthy's. And then also, we heard today Yuri Bukhenik has been reassigned via Colonel Noble. So I thought it'd be great for us to come up and talk about this. Let's just do this first. Todd, how have you been post Karen Reed trial? Have you kind of come down from all this? Have you sorted through the information? What have been your thoughts?
Brian, I thought I was going to come down. I thought that, once we get the verdict, there's closure, there's things come to an end, so to speak. But I find myself, probably because of my participation with you and Nan, I find myself still processing all of the information, all of the testimony, how Nan and I would opine on some of these different subject matters, how you've led the discussion on your channel in really highlighting things for your audience to get a deeper understanding and clarification and truth. This is key, clarification and truth, not the BS that's floating around out there in the internets, in the world of YouTube. So that's really kind of been still occupying my mind.
Yeah, we'll get Nan back in a second. Looked like she might have dropped off. Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy for me as well. Like just trying to process all of this. And again, I made a post a couple of weeks ago. I thought that it was going to be the ability to say, okay, things have kind of concluded, but we might still talk about things that pop up. But I still find myself in it like yourself. I mean, there's still a lot of analyzation that I go through. There's still a lot of the data that I like to go through it. There's testimony that I've been rewatching, and it just, everything makes sense. And we were talking about this in the green room, justice for John. I think Karen, and I know Karen's gotten a lot of shit for this from the anti-free Karen Reed crowd, but she made that statement out on the courtroom steps, which I call vindication or victory day, and said, no one has fought harder over the last 4 years for justice for John but myself. And it's so true, because she had to go through what she went through. 2 trials, her name, her reputation, everything dragged all over the state of Massachusetts, and had to go through 2 trials to prove to everybody that she did not do this. And I think Alan Jackson said it perfectly on Turtle Boy's show the other day, that Karen Reed, even though it's not the burden of proof for her to show that she's not guilty, but she proved that in that trial. She proved it. Nan, what do you think about all of that?
That's a great question, and I kind of yeeted myself again out of your stream. I almost feel like I may restart and join you back, but to answer your question, I felt when she made that statement on the courthouse steps that was so poetic to me, because by fighting for her innocence with all of the help of Aidan Carney, all the content creators, all the boots on the ground, all of the Free Karen Reed supporters throughout the world.
Oh, I think we lost her. She'll boot and come back. But, just to kind of piggyback off that, I think that you're going into, all the work that everybody has done, creating this Free Karen Reed movement, putting this case to the forefront. And I know we've talked about this multiple times. Alan Jackson, when I had the first time to ever have that ability to meet him, took us aside and said, I am so thankful for everything that you guys have done, because publicly, this would be such a different case for Karen. I think she needed that buildup, because let's face it, Todd, if this case went kind of under the rug, okay, and it wasn't so open and discussed about like we've been doing, I think, yes, it probably would have grabbed some headlines at some point, but not made that overall impact until like Court TV, Law and Crime were probably potentially streaming it. But we wouldn't have had the openness and have those conversations, pre-trial. I mean, it's just my assumption. All this, to me, it probably just would have been another headline in the local paper. What do you think about that, Todd?
Yeah, I think as much as this was a movement, I still kind of feel like that statement doesn't give the real true perspective of what it took. Karen went up against the machine. And there are very few things in life that we are exposed to that have a systemic dominance, that have a systemic control hold on things, and can call the shots and manipulate. And she fought a battle, and it needed the outside attention. It needed really smart people that wouldn't ordinarily acquiesce to someone's innocence to say, hey, something stinks here and something's really wrong here. And I think when everyone, again, yes, there are people on the other side of the movement, but I think when the masses started saying the same thing and started really calling out some of the discrepancies, the inadequacies, the biasness within the investigation, within the trial in and of itself, everyone was like, wait a minute here. And I just think it was those layers that just added traction. It was those layers of discrepancies that were happening at the highest level of our government here in the state, right? It doesn't get higher than that.
Yeah.
And to say, okay, you've got a local attorney in Unetti, and they bring in, this flashy guy from LA and Alan Jackson. Well, I cannot imagine a more synchronized team of professionals that put together such a powerful case, kept it professional. They took their jabs where they could, but they kept it professional, and the best outcome happened. So,
yeah, no, I'm sorry that you just finished, Todd, or?
Yeah, I'm finished. Just phenomenal.
Oh yeah. I completely, agree. I want to go back to when we first started actually talking, and that's probably, gosh, it's got to be over a year. I remember seeing you on that PBS special, and I remember I've seen a big change in you, the way that you've approached this case now, knowing all the evidence, and obviously Karen has been acquitted. But I saw you on that special, and you were very reserved. And I know you're the type of guy, now knowing who you are, that you need to see all of the evidence before you make a determination. When was it in that point of time that the light started to kind of change for you a little bit and say, wait a minute here. This is not adding up to what the Commonwealth is saying.
The case from the very beginning had holes in it for me. And my honest opinion, I thought the inadequacies of the investigation was enough to declare a mistrial. It was that I felt that strongly about it, but it didn't go that way. So what's the next best? Well, from my own experience as being a use of force expert in testifying and in looking at evidence, I needed to wait for the medical examiner information, Dr. Scotty Bello. I needed to wait for the ARCA information, right? The science behind what they were doing. And, you know, I had my own personal thoughts on the lack of injuries based on the allegations. And that's why you saw me in such a reserved position, because something stinks, something doesn't add up here for the Commonwealth, but we don't have all the information yet to make a declarative decision. So that's just kind of how I roll, and I take that posture when I'm working on my own cases.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Nan, if you want to go back to talking about that moment of Karen Read speaking out on the courtroom steps, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
What an opportune time for me to yeet myself. I'm so sorry. So what I was saying was that when Karen said on the courthouse steps that she fought harder for John O'Keefe's justice than anyone, it was really poetic to me, because by fighting for her innocence with all of the help of those that I listed, it was really, I mean, it's very ironic, because in order to better serve John O'Keefe's justice, to move the needle in the direction of pointing the fingers at those who really are the culprits or those who have something to hide, and by unveiling, as Todd was just kind of going through, the ineptitude, the discrepancies, the deficiencies, and frankly, the abysmal policing that has taken place in her investigation, and the prosecutorial overstep and overreach, and I dare say judicial overreach and excess. That is how Karen fought for not only her own justice, but for John's as well. And that's why it always irked me when a lot of people online who are anti-Free Karen Read have always said, oh, this is about John O'Keefe. You're only in this for Karen. You know, they'll put pictures of John, somehow implying that those who supported Karen were forgetting about him. Nothing could have been further from the truth. And now we see these pivotal movements in terms of disciplinary actions, lateral moves, demotions, terminations, etc. And I dare say there will be more. After this discussion, I'm forecasting some more. It's really going to unveil this monster that I've been writing about for weeks now in Norfolk County, as I like to call it.
Yeah, the empire must fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, to piggyback on what Nan's saying, you know, people can have their feelings about Karen. However, how do you ignore the peripheral shenanigans that have happened unrelated to her? I mean, yes, they're part of the trial. I'm speaking specifically about the disciplinary action within the state police. All on this case, right? Their misconduct has nothing to do with any other case except for the Karen Read trial. And you know, it's just I don't understand how people can overlook that aspect of this entire scenario.
This is to me, it's such a pivotal moment in Massachusetts history, you know, to really, I mean, we've had the long track record of the issues with Mass State Police, you know, those long issues. And it's kind of like the scandals have been exposed. They get talked about a little bit in the media for a little bit, and then it just goes away. And then you're just waiting for the next one to come around. But this one here, I think, to Todd's credit, you know, the compounding nature of it, and so many people involved, and all the legs that got twisted through this. And then you come to find out, like, you know, these three individuals, Tully, Proctor, and Bukhenik, that were kind of the head of the food chain in this investigation, in my opinion, were the most corrupt ones of them all. they doctored evidence, in my opinion. They you know, there was documents that weren't correctly taken care of, witness statements that weren't taken. There was no audio recordings of everything. Like going back to Michael Proctor's texts and talking in that text chain, pinning on the girl, and then 14 to 16 hours out, he already had made his mind up of how they were going to twist and turn this, and then seeing the ladders of the rung that Turtle Boy exposed from the bottom up, how all these people interconnected. And it's the most craziest thing to think about. And people called me crazy for the longest time. There's no way that these many people could be involved in such a thing.
Right.
I think it started out to be very minute, and then it just grew into an octopus, and the tentacles grabbed everybody that was in and around this thing. And I'm sure there's a ringleader in this, and I have my opinion in it, who was the person that probably put their foot down and threatened many, many people. And this is the way that it's going to be, and the way that things are going to be said. It's insane, like literally insane what just happened.
And it's
and what we found out
interesting.
during these two trials. I'm
And
sorry, Nan, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you, Brian, but it's also interesting now because of the timing. I think people think this was just going to be like a news cycle, right? Like you were saying, like, okay, it's going to get brushed under the rug. But now, contemporaneously, you're now seeing with the Brian Walsh trial that is coming and all of the pretrial motions and hearings that are going to be taking place and are taking place, you are contemporaneously seeing a prime example of where there are police missteps and oversights and overreach and just going beyond what warrants allow, or doing things when there was no probable cause to do them, not crossing your T's, dotting your I's. You have an exact example of how that could have catastrophic impact on someone who is presumed to be an innocent, meaning Brian Walsh, but who, in my opinion, is trending in my mind towards some guilt. Okay, that's my opinion. I'm seeing, well, I don't want to, I definitely believe in innocent until proven guilty, but like some of this evidence is like, oof, okay. I couldn't be a juror because I kind of made up my mind on that.
Hacksaws with blood and DNA on them in the basement. Tarps, we'll go buy some Tarvac suits. We'll dispose, we'll make a couple of stops along the way of some landfills and dumpsters. We got Google searches on his kid's iPad of how to dispose of a body. How long does it take for a body to smell? And it's pretty nuts, Nan.
And you have Sandra Birchmore's, which is also contemporaneous. Yeah. It's just, it's very rare. I don't know, Todd, if you agree, but it is rare from my observation to see where there is police misconduct and investigative deficiency, where you then see contemporaneous examples moving through court systems where there can be a derivative effect. It's like the best example of how this can go awry. Like I always say, and I try to break things down, legal issues for people so they understand when they're not lawyers. When I'm disciplining my kids, I make sure I discipline them at the time. Because if I come at them a week later, 6 months later, a year later, they're going to be like, what was this about? Now we see these concurrent issues that are right here involving many, not all, but many of the same characters. It's laid out. And like you said, Brian, it's a really opportune time. It's a, I don't want to use the word wonderful. It's just a really unique moment in history for Massachusetts for there to be change. This is it. Maura Healey, here it is. Your AG, whose name I constantly forget, here
Andrea Campbell.
Yes, I keep forgetting her name. Here it is before you. So do something. As AJ would say, do it. So it's almost like too much to be ignored at this point.
How do you feel about Colonel Noble so far, Todd?
Well, that's a great question. Colonel Noble was hired to, again, originally from Massachusetts, but by way of New Jersey. So thank you, Nan. We
My pleasure.
appreciate the present. Colonel Noble was giving, pardon the pun, but marching orders from the governor's office. The department needs some cleaning up. The department needs the ship taken off the rocks and back into open waters. And unfortunately, he's got a lot of different issues to clean up and to clear up. But again, that's his mandate. And as surprising as it was to see this latest transfer with Sergeant Bukhenik, I'm not surprised, because if there's more to resolve, then he and his command staff are going to do exactly that. And they're going to make sure that the integrity of the Massachusetts State Police is brought back into the hearts and minds of the general public within the Commonwealth. So he hasn't shied away from it. In fact, I believe he's probably given more statements, public statements, about various issues since he's been in office than the two previous colonels.
Todd, two-part question for you. Do you think that action is happening fast enough? And how do we bridge that gap between police and community? Again, Todd, knowing just what happened in Karen's case, you know that a lot of people in this chat still don't trust police. How do we bridge that gap, Todd?
Brian, let me answer the timeline of things. It has to take let me give you two scenarios. I'll answer the question. I'll give you a scenario.
Sure.
It's got to take the process. And if the process is slow, then slow wins the race. And here is why. Because of due process, if there's allegations of misconduct and there is a disciplinary action levied against that trooper still has an appeal process. Think about how much worse if things were done inappropriately by the department and that trooper was then allowed to be reinstated. That would be an even worse scenario.
Right.
So let it play itself out. Let all of the things be vetted. They either have merit or they don't. If they don't have merit, so be it. If they do have merit, then the department made a very bold and wise decision to in Proctor's case, terminate, and Bukhenik's, in Tully's case, transfer. Let it be that. And then also keep in mind this second round, and I wanted to share this coming into the show, that the state police, when they conduct disciplinary actions, usually it's done at the time of that departmental administrative action, and it's done. The fact that they came back a second time, remember, Bukhenik lost time off the books. That's 100% a disciplinary action. The secondary action, I can speculate it was a fallout from the second trial, or it may be things that were discovered with some high-profile cases coming up that he was involved in. So it can only be one of those two things in my world.
That's something I was interested in finding out from you, Todd, which was, it seemed like this was a double shot, so to speak, which is my drink of choice, by the way, the Starbucks double shot. But I felt like, okay, wait, he lost vacation days, and now
Tully.
they're going.
Tully lost the vacation days. It was Tully.
Was it only Tully? Because I could have.
Bukhenik had disciplinary.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've been making myself a chart along the way as these guys are, it's like whack-a-mole. Who's in trouble? I was going to share it with you, Brian, but I was not 100% sure of my accuracy, and I always try to be as
there's a lot of information in this case. It's tough sometimes. I forget stuff too.
And my notes said that from a few months back, he forfeited 5 vacation days for failing to reprimand Proctor. And by failing to reprimand, I'm including within that whether or not he reprimanded him or not, which may have been the finding, just by touting and liking with the thumbs up some of the, salacious content to the text messaging. So I actually, in my mind, I didn't care if he reprimanded him or not. In the day of emojis, you got to be very careful. you know, make sure you keep those emojis in their holster, because if you simply ignore something, you have plausible deniability. If you give a thumbs up or a heart or something, you're emphasizing a reaction. But my note said as to Bukhenik, forfeited 5 vacation days for failing to reprimand Proctor and then reassigned to the Division of Standards and Training on temporary duty assignment. And I had wanted to know this from Todd. So when you had asked earlier, Brian, I was like, ooh, I want to find out from Todd why there would be kind of a 1-2 punch with him. And it's interesting that it can really only be one of the 2 things he's describing. And I dare say, in my opinion, some of the things that Buchanan.
Oh no, we lost her again. She'll come back. What I want to ask you, Todd, when we get Nan back here, how do these things go down? So it wasn't like an advisory board like they had with Proctor. So it wasn't that intense. So did they just do this as a formal office conversation? Did they just have them commit, like, you know, Bukhenik would come in and sit with Noble and they would have a conversation? Or is this in front of some witnesses on a board like Proctor had?
They may not have had the formal trial board like Michael Proctor had, to your point, Brian, but certainly they reopened the investigation where it's connected to the same, you know, same Karen Reed trial, his supervisory oversight, but you know, just even the way he testified, you know, it was evasive. It was a poor showing of his professional character, but did it violate department policy? I don't know that to be the case. So, and again, you know, we were just saying, Nan, how, you know, how this second time around with Bukhenik being called on the carpet, you know, unusual. It like I said, it usually happens in one big bang, but in this particular case, it happened again. I think audio problems, Nan.
It's not. It must be the internet. We had a bad thunderstorm, so I'm so apologize for the unprofessionalism on my part. And you can send any complaints to Verizon Fido.
Yes, you can send them to me. I'll take it.
Here's my
Go ahead.
cliffhanger.
Finish on your cliffhanger, Nan.
God, I'm taking you guys out for a pizza when I see you next time. But here's my cliffhanger, and it knocks me off right at the most important point.
I know.
I think it was missteps that Bukhenik either testified to or affirmative actions he took that, you know, he says he took during the trial that he should never have taken. Like, I think it was trial 2.0 that significantly and proximately caused this kind of second punch at what's now come to him. So I'm going to forecast I'm probably going to get knocked off again. I apologize, guys.
All right, let's go through the quick timeline so we can get everybody updated, because there might be some new people that are coming in going, what the heck are you talking about? By the way, let me introduce my guests again tonight. We have a wonderful gentleman on with us. His name is Todd McGhee. He's a retired Mass State Police trooper. And then obviously the lovely, beautiful young lady here to the panel is Attorney Nan Gallagher. She's a Jersey girl. And Nan, are you a Bon Jovi fan or what?
Am I? Yes, I am. Oh, and now my dog is too. I am, and also I had the honor of seeing John Bon Jovi playing at PNC Arts Center. Pardon my dog. And he had John Mellencamp show up at his concert, and they played a bunch of songs together, and it was one of the highlights of my life, actually.
John Mellencamp, Mr. Attitude.
Yeah, but you know what though? He sings one of my favorite songs, which is Authority Song, and they did a great job. I am a Bon Jovi fan, though.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, great run there in the 80s, and still lives on. But anyway, let's get caught up here on the timeline. So we're talking about the three bad dudes, as my thumbnail says. So we have Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully in October of 24 will my notes here say will no longer serve as unit commander of the State Police Detective Unit assigned with Norfolk County District Attorney. We lost Nan again. She'll come back. And then we have the State Police transferred Tully to a temporary position in the Division of Investigative Services and will continue to assist the DA in previous cases and internal affairs investigations. And Tully is ongoing, State Police said. Then on 3/25, we had the advisory board hearing of Michael Proctor, and then ultimately in the end, we got you back. Ultimately, in the end, Proctor gets fired at the end of March, or just at the beginning of April, I think it was. So he's ultimately fired. And then today, we get news that Bukhenik obviously will be moved in the Division of Standards and Training, MSP, Mass State Police. And I find this interesting, though. These guys are bad actors in obviously being disciplined for their investigative skills, Todd, but they're being transferred and allowed to still take place in divisions of investigation. Why is this, Todd? Why is this?
Yeah. So unless there's a demotion, Tully and Bukhenik were transferred, but were allowed to retain their rank. So they have to move into a lateral area of job description, so to speak. For a lieutenant, the only other option would be a barracks commander, meaning that they would run a barracks. They would have 2 or 3 sergeants, probably maybe a dozen or so, almost 24 troopers assigned to the barracks, and that would make up that barracks. But other than that, those positions are usually in some type of investigative capacity.
Like this question from Debbie, it's for Todd. So Todd, do you think they're looking into Yuri's actions and rehoming him as the first for doing this round? Kind of like Proctor, I guess that's what they're asking. How do you feel about this?
Well, again, I was surprised to see them come back with this secondary disciplinary action. So if there was going to be something greater, like a demotion, I would, thinking about how the department works,
Sure.
that would have happened this time around. They're not going to come back a third time, because then sergeants within the state police still have union protection. They're going to look at precedents. You know, has this type of discipline been done to another trooper? So it starts to get very complex. So, you know, the fact that he was transferred, he's in under division and standards temporarily. They're probably just looking to see whether there's a different supervisory position at a barracks level somewhere.
Yeah, let's get caught up with Real T. She says, and we've talked about this on the show, and she might have not caught it, but for our new viewers here, I saw a couple of people that said they're new here tonight. Let's talk about the pension, Todd. Does Proctor lose his pension? If you can go through that process. We had a great presentation. I forget what show it was, but we talked about this. But if you want to give some context to that for our new viewers.
Yeah, this is a great question. A lot of people were trying to understand the state pension system. And in Proctor's case, he did not serve enough time to be eligible for a pension. So there's nothing for him to lose. The way the law reads is that a state trooper must serve 20 plus years to qualify for a pension. That starts at 60% and then increases incrementally over time served. But in Proctor's case, he is not receiving a pension of any sort, of any kind.
Yeah. What usually happens to guys? Do they go into like private security or start, you know, consulting firms as, you know, if things like this happen? Is that usually what ends up happening? I mean, I don't know. Like what happens to officers if they're disciplined like this and lose their positions? Do they usually start like security companies or anything like that? Have you heard any experience like that?
They would be able to go in the private sector. They could go to maybe not like a public safety, but a private security company for like maybe a pharmaceutical company, right? That scenario. Now, here's the issue about becoming a private eye. If someone was decertified by post, I don't know if that also carries over into those other licensures. So that would be interesting, right? Because post is relatively new. It's been around just for a few years. So if someone has been assessed as being decertified, then they cannot be a police officer anywhere in the United States.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that, because I remember there was a case quite a while back, maybe 2014, 15. It was a Newberry cop that is I'm just trying to word this correctly. Let's just say that he was out kind of playing around in his lap, Todd, and he got caught, and he tried to deny this. I guess a lady at an ATM caught him kind of playing around with himself, if you want to say that in a nice way. He got caught, and there's actually his interrogations online. And ultimately, he lied through his interview with his chief. And then ultimately, a couple days later, said, "Hey, yeah, I got caught." I think he was decertified, but he went on, just like you said, to become like a private security for. I think he ended up go working like the marijuana business or something. He ended up being like a private security, and that was kind of the fallout. So yeah, I understand what you're saying there. You know, that these types of jobs that, once they have, they're fired or whatever, they can go into that. It's a little scary though. I mean, you're in control of people's businesses, and you've done some nefarious things, especially in this case with reports and witnesses. I mean, I don't know if I'd be handing the keys to the Emerald City to these people.
Yeah, well, I mean, that new employer is going to have to do their own due diligence. Is it a character issue with an individual? Was it just a bad mistake they got caught up in? I don't know if you can separate the two, but those are real issues moving forward in someone's career path.
Yeah. Let me just get to a couple of these chats. Donna, thank you so much for the $2 super chat. I appreciate that. And always the Goodmans in here. Love that. Giving away a member. So we have a new member. I wanted to talk about, so DeChico has been reported as well to be rehomed. Howie Carr put out a tweet about 4 hours ago. He says, another one bites the dust in Norfolk County. Trooper David DeChico on Proctor's infamous text message chain has now been reassigned to the Holden Barracks for the Mass State Police. Take cover, Turtle Boy, because we know he's from that area up in Worcester County. And it said he made $181,000 last year. These salaries are insane. So how does that work, Todd? Is it you usually get a base salary and then they're making a lot of their time by doing detail work, or is this, their base salaries are 181? I don't know how that works, the salary structure.
Yeah, no, the base salary is not that high. That number looks high because it's based on any details that were worked, which is at a set fee or a set rate. And then there is overtime work. So your overtime is time and a half. So when you add up salary, details, overtime, those three tiers, or if you will, of compensation add up to the annual salary.
Interesting. It's a lot of money.
Keep in mind when you have issues. So I'll give you a real personal example. After 9/11, I was reassigned to Logan Airport. We were working 18-hour days, mandated.
Wow.
So, that number increases very, very quickly. Now, that wasn't forever, but I can tell you it was at least good 6 months.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure you made a lot of money then doing 16-hour shifts.
Yep.
And deservedly so. I mean, you're protecting the great citizens of Massachusetts in and around Logan Airport. And those were very very heightened and trying times during that time. So I can get it.
And when you think about times like with the marathon bombings, right? The manhunt, that's another opportunity, for mandated long hours. So it happens not every year, but these days it's not rare that every other year there's a significant event that impacts department-wide.
Yeah.
This is making me just want to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm trying a different browser, so we'll see if that helps. I'm wondering if a FOIA request was placed, if there's a way for inquisitive taxpayers to find out what a particular law enforcement officer was paid as base salary versus how much overtime he or she worked in a given calendar year. Just to kind of see if there were any, and there could be more specifics to that, but just to see if there was any excesses that are notable in particular time periods. I mean, I'm thinking back to the trip to the Cape that Kevin Albert and Michael Proctor took, which I recall hearing somewhere that they were doing whatever they were doing, attending a bar, losing their firearms and identification, while on salary or while being paid. They were on, quote, duty. And I'm just curious as to what constitutes on duty and whether or not they put in for overtime. And I know, Todd, you probably can't drill down on that, but I'm just thinking out loud that if I were an interested citizen, and because there is apparently a panoply of moving parts here and musical chairs with positions of law enforcement officers, either right before or right after the trial in this matter, with these other trials that are looming that we discussed, if it's worth kicking the tires on how much overtime goes into some of these individuals' salaries, including those who haven't been moved. Like, I want to say I heard that Paul Gallagher, I don't remember his title. I remember that I unfortunately share a last name with him. But I remember his salary was like astronomical. I'd love to see how much was overtime versus base salary. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, salaries for public safety officials are published here in Massachusetts. However, I don't believe they give a clean breakdown as to what I described as base, overtime, and detail rates. However, if you had the parameters of trooper first class, meaning they've served X amount of years, here's their set base salary, then you do the math. It wouldn't be that hard to figure out. But short of just a gross number, breaking out the math, I haven't seen that done before.
Thank you for answering that. I see Brian's wheels churning. He's like, I wonder if I can ask AI to start doing comparatives. Do I know you well enough yet? You know,
yeah, but the funny thing is that, and I can tell you this, Nan, like I've submitted multiple FOIA requests to the Mass State Police. Do you know how many that I've got back with information? You know how many I've got returned?
Maybe 1, 0.
Yeah, 1. But when I get the answers, well, actually, no, a couple have been returned to me, but I get the answer and then I get this long legal bullshit that's put inside of it because they don't want to give it up. I'm going to let everybody know right now. I currently, immediately after the trial ended, I put in a FOIA request. I want Trooper Proctor's file. I want to see it. I want the internal investigation. It is over. It should be made public. We should be able to see that. And maybe Todd can guide me in this as well, too, for the reasons if I don't get it or why I should be able to get it. And number 2, in the last time I did this last year, as the first trial ended, I submitted a FOIA request to get all the body cam footage from all the Mass State Police of all the arrests, the intake footage of Karen Reed's case. They will not release it to me, but isn't it funny that it finds its way into documentaries that we've probably watched, 3 of them so far, but they won't release it to the public. I currently have a standing FOIA request for that information as well, too. I guarantee you I'm going to get an answer next fucking year, probably this time.
Yeah.
There was reports that WCVB was trying to FOIA some requests, and they came back with this ridiculous labor number of like $300,000. Oh, you want the information? And it was salary structures, I believe, now that it's coming into my mind. Yeah, you want that information? It's $300,000.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a very thoughtful, carefully worded additional FOIA request is going to be submitted by yours truly. Not that yours wasn't, but I want to see if what they're
man,
gonna
I'll
say.
share you the responses if you want to work with me on this.
Yeah.
We'll get the information. But this is where I'm going to bring this back to, and I'm going to ask Todd about this, bridging the gap. Let's bridge the gap here, Todd. Let's mend some relationships. Let's allow the public to see these files. It's out there. These cases are over. It should be public knowledge. No? Am I wrong, Todd?
Well, what you just said right there, Brian, the case is over. During a case, it's too convenient for an agency to say, as a result of an ongoing investigation or as a result of an ongoing trial, that they can just kind of sidestep you. That's done. That's over. So I'd encourage you to continue the process. Try again. What's the appeal process if I get a no answer again? And just keep banging the drum.
Yeah.
And I think I heard Mark Betterow arguing today during Turtle Boy's hearing that, Proctor's out there anyway doing documentaries or interviews and putting himself out there. So even though that's not specifically tied to a FOIA request, I think any expectation of privacy, any cloak that the Commonwealth or any agency or entity within the Commonwealth wants to try to assert over Proctor, for example, that's voided. It's waived. And everything should come to bear. I mean, people need to be able to see this. Proctor, for all of the horrible things I personally think about him as a person and as an officer, he is going to be dissected much further on this. And that dissection is hopefully going to help future law enforcement officers, supervisors.
Oh, we got a cliffhanger again. Poor Nan. Every time she's had a great point tonight, this has happened. Don't worry, Nan. We'll come back to your cliffhanger. The whole audience is going to be like, no. Let's try to answer this really quick. We probably have a new viewer here tonight, and I'd love to get you a take on this, Todd. Do you think the timing of Proctor's firing was because of the Karen Reed trial?
100%. You know, we had talked about this, Brian, in some of the earlier shows. You know, I want to pause and let Nan finish her thought.
Yeah, go ahead, Nan.
This is so bad and so embarrassing, guys. I actually have really good internet. But this dissection of Proctor, which is happening now and will happen in the future, it needs to be for the purpose of educating in the future. Law enforcement, prosecutors, any investigative agency, anyone also who might come in the crosshairs of a detective or a trooper in the future should understand his or her rights and understand, you know, what they can and cannot ask for if they too or a loved one's being investigated. So I look at what's happening to Proctor and these other law enforcement officers as almost educational and scientific in nature.
Mm-hmm. Todd, do you want to follow up on any of that, or?
Well, just my previous thought was that the timing of Proctor's termination. Let's first talk about his suspension. His suspension was released. The announcement was released hours after the mistrial declared by Judge Cannoni. And then, you know, some time went on, and then there was the trial board process. And then it was like 3 or 4 days before the results of the trial board were made public. So, you know, its timing is not coincidental. Timing is by design. And we also have to understand, again, behind the scenes of things, I'm speculating, but any political influence between the DA's office and the state police decision-making process. So timing was by design.
Todd, how does this make you feel? Someone that wore the badge, someone that wore the uniform, someone that is brothers with these guys, and you did your job correctly. You respected the badge, and now you see all this kind of unfolding. Is this just different times? Is this kind of the Wild West cowboy mentality? That's what I kind of feel like these three guys. It's like the three amigos, you know, we're the most powerful dudes in town. We're going to run this thing the way we want to run it. Hey, whatever. If we collect evidence, we do it correctly. If we get witness statements, we do it. Hey, maybe we need to doctor up some evidence here and there to kind of really stick it to the person that we're trying to get. How does this make you feel overall?
You know, Brian, it's a great question. I've seen misconduct dating back to when I started my law enforcement career in 1987. And you just have, unfortunately, members of the department that have a low sense of character, low sense of ethics and morality, and they get caught up in things every time they're discovered. So, you know, it's a matter of, here we are again, to some degree. Professionally speaking, the state police was good for me and my family, and I don't like seeing my former agency under scrutiny like this. However, it's warranted. And the members of the department are making selfish decisions and are tarnishing the badge. They're tarnishing the reputation of the department. Welcome back. And, you know, it's just those, it's a matter of course of business, Brian. I'm not surprised. There are other scandals that we could talk about, and some of the troopers involved in those situations are friends of mine. You know, I've got them in my digital Rolodex, but it is what it is.
It's gotta gut punch you though. Like you gotta probably wake up and be like, really another one.
Yeah.
Another one. It's happened again. It's happened again. I'm going to take this comment from Cleopatra. She said, I love your guest. I love it when people actually know what they're talking about and actually educate your audience. There's so much to learn here. And thank you. I appreciate you being here. We appreciate you being here. We love having these conversations. We love doing these talks. We love to educate. And that's something that I always wanted to do here on this platform is, use the evidence, talk to the evidence, have these open, conversations, ping pong ideas back and forth, and have adult based conversations. Yeah, we have fun here. We joke around and laugh and all that stuff too. But, we want to get to peel these layers back and really give things that the audience can think about in a particular situation. Maybe you agree with us, maybe you don't. And that's why we do these kind of public forums here and have these conversations. Let's do this. Let's transition a little bit. Hopefully Nan can get back and we can talk about Karen Reed's upcoming civil suit. And there was an article that was published today on masslive.com. Let me get a sip of water here and I'll read through a little bit of it. So it says that Karen Reed beefs up defense team for wrongful death lawsuit with 3 new lawyers. So it goes on. It says Karen Reed added 3 new lawyers to her defense team to represent her in the wrongful death lawsuit brought by the family of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Reed, 45, was acquitted of all charges connected in the death with O'Keefe last month following the lengthy trial. Prosecutors had accused her of backing her Lexus SUV into O'Keefe after a night of drinking. She was found guilty of operating under the influence. As while Reed's first trial concluded in a mistrial last year, O'Keefe's family filed a suit into Plymouth Superior Court, claiming Reed was responsible for O'Keefe's death. The family also named 2 Canton bars where the pair drank on the night of the death of the defendants. A trio of attorneys with all the Boston-based firm Sheehan Feeney, I think that's the way that you pronounce it, filed appearances to represent Reed in a civil case, which is pending in Plymouth Superior Court. Specifically, Damon Slegelson, Charles Water, and Aaron D. Rosenberg all joined Reed's defense team last week, according to court filings. They joined 3 lawyers from the firm Mellick and Porter, who also represented Reed, Christopher George, William L. Kaysville Jr., and Marissa Padalini. The 3 lawyers from Sheehan Feeney, and I probably have this wrong, all cite business litigation in areas of expertise. It's not clear of what role they'll play in the civil case. And this is interesting. An attorney representing one of the Canton bars, C.F. McCarthy's, withdrew from the case last week from a firm out of Peabody and Arnold, but did not list the reason why of the retrial. I'm going to redraw. I'm going to bring Nan in. I think she jumped out on her phone. And Nan, I don't know if you heard us talking there, but if you can kind of give some insight to where the civil case is. I know we saw I'm just going to use the OJ case for an example. OJ is obviously acquitted. He goes to the civil trial and they get him on the civil trial. How do civil trials work versus, just to give some basics here, Nan, how do civil trials work versus a criminal trial? I know you get a lot more discovery in a civil. I'll let you explain that. You're the lawyer.
I look shorter than you guys now. Wait, let me sit crisscross applesauce.
Hey, I have a prop up seat if you need it. Lauren used to have to use it when she came in.
Unbelievable. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So guys, I assure you I'm a better lawyer than I am a techie, but all right. So here we go. So I didn't hear all of what you were discussing, but yes, the civil suit, it's a different pathway. It's not really supposed to be a replacement for criminal liability, but in this case, we don't have a case yet, but Karen is trending towards one hell of a 1983 civil rights action. It's a federal lawsuit that would be filed against the Commonwealth, the prosecutor's office, the individual prosecutors, the Massachusetts State Police, specifically named police troopers, etc., the Canton PD, and individually named Canton police officers, etc. Anyone who perceivably trampled on her rights. And that lawsuit will assert a whole bunch of different due process violations, all of the reasons set forth in the motion to dismiss the criminal complaint for extraordinary prosecutorial misconduct that was argued in or about March when I was up there in Dedham. All of the missteps and how they contributed to her, not only her financial loss, her loss of freedom. She was out on bail and had to live within the confinements of bail provisions, which, as we all know, Aiden Carney is enduring right now, the loss of her license, etc. All of these losses of liberties, the adverse impact on her reputation, not only reputational harm, but emotional distress and the physical manifestations of that. So bundle and bake in all of those different causes of action, because it's a civil lawsuit for monetary damages, into a 1983 civil rights action. She has an extremely strong case, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time before she files it. It looks like I think what you were saying earlier was she's added attorneys to help her file
She
that,
added
or
3, yeah.
from what, because I didn't hear or read that article, you're sure that wasn't adding attorneys to defend the wrongful death action against her?
It says a trio. It says, I'll read it again. A trio of attorneys with the Boston base. I think it's Shaheen and Feeney, and I may pronounce that wrong, filed appearances to represent Reed in a civil file, which is pending in Plymouth Superior Court. It says
that's different.
The 3 attorneys joined Reed's team last week, according to court filings. They joined 3 lawyers from Mellick and Porter, who already represented Reed. It says the 3 lawyers from Sheehan and Feeney are all cite business litigation as an area of expertise, but it's not clear what role they'll play in Reed's case.
Okay, so I'm going by what you're reading, which I don't doubt whatsoever, but that's a different story than what we're talking about. So she is adding, or they have added, additional attorneys to defend the wrongful death action that has been filed against her, which is different than this 1983 civil suit, which will be her own. So my understanding from some of that news when I heard it, I might have been right before the 4th of July, was that they were actually possibly just adding a couple of additional attorneys from the same firms that already represent her to defend that lawsuit. What is likely happening in that wrongful death action where Karen is a defendant is that her insurance carrier that insures her vehicle and possibly her homeowner's insurance, if they have not disclaimed coverage, meaning saying to her, we're not covering you for any loss that may have been sustained, i.e. the death of John O'Keefe. If they have not disclaimed coverage, they will, by virtue of their insurance policy, avail her to counsel. They will provide, I serve in that capacity, not for her, but for others, where the insurance company will assign me as panel counsel to defend someone. With that said, I imagine that Karen is also adding her own additional attorneys to replace, or to not replace, to supplement and enhance those already assigned insurance counsel to defend her for that lawsuit. That's my guess. But I was talking about her anticipated civil rights action, which it's coming. AJ was forecasting it or foreshadowing it the other night during his interview. I know, as someone who files civil rights actions all the time, that this is a strong one. I keep saying Karen Reed's going to own Massachusetts at some point.
Just so I get everybody kind of sorted in the chat, we're talking about 2 suits. There's going to be most likely a civil suit that we haven't heard about yet, but we've heard about the wrongful death lawsuit that's been put out against from the O'Keefes against Karen and the bars. And it's funny, and that's kind of what we're touching on now. And it says in this article, Nan, that and this is really interesting, and I want to hear your take on this too. An attorney representing one of the Canton bars, C.F. McCarthy's, withdrew from the case last week, but did not list the reason why of the withdrawal. Why would an attorney all of a sudden just kind of have this epiphany and just say, yeah, I'm going to withdraw? Are they just too busy? Is something in this case probably scaring them, or
No.
what would that be?
No, it's probably, and I could look at the docket, or someone who's licensed there, because I'm not yet, could show me the docket, but it's likely that the attorney who withdrew either left the firm. I mean, that happens all the time. The attorneys move to different firms all the time, so they have to formally withdraw from an action, or there was a disconnect between, for example, C.F. McCarthy's and that lawyer's office. Sometimes the client doesn't love the demeanor, the composure, the manner of communication of the assigned attorney, and they make a request to their insurance company, hey, I'd like another attorney from your panel. I don't think there's anything nefarious, as Jen McCabe would say, with that. It happens all the time.
Todd, if there's no collision, how are we suing people here? How are we suing people here, Todd?
Yeah, we're like-minded, Brian. I'd like to think that treasure trove of evidence is still available for Karen in the civil trial. Whether you like how the investigation went or not, you can't argue against science. Science is unbiased. Science tells its own story. Science does the math. And then again, it's up to those of us to interpret all that information. But there's just too many things working in Karen's favor again in the civil proceeding to not benefit her.
Nan, how do the O'Keefes twist and turn this in a civil suit to try to get it in their favor? And how does this work? Now they'll get more discovery, they'll go through depositions, and then who ultimately makes the decision? Is it a jury, or does a judge make these decisions, or is it, how would this work?
It's a great question. Those are great questions. So first off, unless the attorneys for all sides request a bench trial, meaning a trial overseen by a judge, then it would go to a jury. I don't know what the number is for civil actions up in the Commonwealth, but typically it's anywhere from 6 to 9 from my experience on civil actions down in New York, New Jersey. I've seen up to 12 on civil cases, but a jury will decide liability, which is, different than criminal culpability. And in a civil action, the standard is lower. It's by a preponderance of the evidence, which is 51% or more. It's different than beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty, which, as AJ made it very clear in his closing argument, you got to be damn certain if you're going to convict. In a civil action, it's by a preponderance of the evidence. What the O'Keefes and Karen can both benefit from is the fact that there is going to be, and I understand it's underway, much more robust discovery, and not Judge Cannoni, frankly, as far as Karen's concerned. So you will likely, hopefully, fingers crossed, have a much more equitable, non-biased judge who's going to go through any of the issues in terms of discovery demands and violations or deficiencies, failure to provide discovery. And that discovery, which is interrogatories, questions and answers, deposition testimony, which is out of court sworn testimony. There's things called requests for admissions, where you can propound or send to the other party certain statements that you want them to admit or deny that can get read before a jury. All of this much more expansive discovery in the civil setting allows many nooks and crannies to get explored, ones that Judge Cannoni would have never allowed. Things like, I want to see all the text messages. I want to, you have subpoena power. So you can say, I want to see this or that. I want those cell phone records from Albert or Higgins or McCabe. You can even ask follow-up questions for that. So both sides can really enhance what they're looking for from the other side. And then, I mean, if I were the O'Keefes, I would try to get admitted into evidence the fact that Karen was convicted on an OUI. They need to convince a jury that that means she was intoxicated beyond the legal limit to place anyone in harm's way and to kind of recklessly disregard the safety and well-being of anyone in her path. I think she's going to have a hard time. She meaning Peggy O'Keefe and the heirs. I think it's Peggy, Paul, and the daughter or the niece of John O'Keefe that are the litigants, the plaintiffs in this matter. I think they're going to have a hard time because all of the testimony in the criminal action, which will come into the civil action, is going to demonstrate by all of the eyewitnesses that Karen seemed to be holding her own, did not exhibit signs of visible intoxication. There's a question, or more than one, as to how much alcohol she consumed. The retrograde extrapolation is questionable at best. Even Bukhenik admitted that he was wrong as to the count of drinks that he was able to deduce that she consumed. So it's an easier, I know this is a long-winded answer, but it's an easier road to get liability against a defendant. But with all of the avenues Karen can pursue in her war chest, she's going to have much more liberal access to things that she can further use to defend herself. I hope that makes sense to your audience.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And I kind of want to ask you about this as well too. And a lot of the theory is that the insurance company is most likely going to pay up for John O'Keefe's death, but this is what I'm very confused about. If there's no collision, then how would they take ownership and responsibility for that?
That's a great question. And that gets into like a little bit more theoretical law plus insurance decision making. So insurance carriers, and I'm forecasting there may be a settlement in this matter. The way settlements happen in civil litigation is that there's no admission of liability. The insurance carrier, it's a payer. It literally runs itself on dollars and cents. And it's kind of money in, money out. They will make a decision as to whether it's worth paying an attorney or a number of attorneys to defend the case versus offering up, quote, the policy limits to the other side. So what would happen is, without an admission of liability, without a full finding of facts that, yes, there was a collision, or yes, she consumed this many drinks, which compromised her from a standpoint of being a risk to people on the roadway or the sides of the road, whatever. The insurance company doesn't look at any of that. They will receive reports from the attorneys representing her. The insurance carrier will receive those reports and say, okay, well, it's questionable as to whether or not she was drunk, or it's questionable as to whether or not he was struck. I think the insurance company will receive reports from the attorneys and say, you know what, it's just, I don't know what her policy limits are, but they'll probably say it's cheaper to offer up to the policy limits or to engage in, I call it the dance. I'll offer, if she has $1 million in policy limits, maybe they'll say, I'll offer you 500,000. And then the other side, meaning the O'Keefes, have to determine their own risks. And if it's worth taking somewhere in between what is offered, which I think something will be offered, and the policy limits. So even though there's no collision, it's sometimes a business decision, and it's probably one that Karen does not have authority to make. Most insurance policies, especially automobile ones, and homeowner ones, because she may be covered by homeowners insurance as well, most of those policies do not require the consent of the insured. So everyone should be asking that question if it hits a newswire, that she settles. And I'm not saying she will or that I have information that she will, but if she does, she will not have admitted liability. And people should say, well, wait a minute, did she have a consent policy? Because if she didn't, then the decision was never hers to make in the first place as to whether they settle.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to kind of clear this up too. And then what I'd like to do is, like, for the last 10 minutes, we can take some Q&A from everybody, because I'm sure a lot of people have questions. So why don't we do this while I ask my last follow-up questions here? If you all want to get ready, just type in the chat a question for T or N or for both. Let's try to give equal share to everybody here. And we'll get some questions in from my great panel guests tonight. If you're just joining the program, I have retired Mass State Police Todd McGhee and the one and only attorney Nan Gallagher with us tonight. So my question is, and I want to clear this for the chat too, civil trials, they don't get streamed, right? This normally is just something that's held between the two entities that are involved in this. And it's usually, a lot of depositions and attorneys involved. Just if you want, Nan,
sometimes
give a basic breakdown of like a civil case or trial.
Civil cases sometimes are streamed. I don't know what the practice. And, if people may remember in your chat, like the Gwyneth Paltrow case. So it varies actually, not only state to state, but look, someone. I'm not even reading your chat anymore. I'm on a phone.
Then.
Well, not always.
Yeah.
Like people should inquire about that, and I'd love to know if you've seen that streamed, civil trial streamed in your jurisdiction.
I don't.
But that would be great. I really enjoyed watching the Gwyneth Paltrow trial. That was fun.
It was interesting.
Then, yeah, I mean, I thought it was ridiculous what the gentleman did to assert such a frivolous lawsuit. But I would bet this is not going to be streamed.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Yeah, I think this is going to be private.
The judge might be able to decide that. It may be a judicial discretion issue.
Yeah. Let's see. EBH asking, question, if the insurance company does pay out to settle, does that need flag Karen to get insurance in the future, or to make insurance her insurance to go up? That's actually a pretty good question. So if the insurance company settles, does this mark or bump Karen's insurance? I can tell you this. I'm going to tell EBH this. I had Nathan up here in the studio probably just a couple weeks ago, maybe just over 3 weeks. What are we, 3 weeks out from post-trial now? And he basically said, Karen's probably, even when she gets the privilege to drive again, is probably not going to be driving for a while.
Yeah.
So, I don't think that she'll, again, with the insurance, but I don't know. Would that raise points on her insurance if they settle out? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, if they settle out her, and by the way, not even if they settle, the fact that there has been a lawsuit against her in which I'm making a reasonable deduction that she put that lawsuit into her insurance company and they assigned counsel. From the moment she did that, her insurance rating, not points, but her insurance rating would have gone up. She would be deemed more of an insurance risk. They actually might put her into the quote high risk pool, and her premiums will most assuredly go up.
Yeah, the OUI,
even if there was no collision.
Yeah.
Even
the
if she
OUI,
wasn't drunk. Yeah.
The OUI is definitely going to get her on that. Let's see. Question from Coffee Lover. Is there a chance Bev could be the judge in Karen's civil trial? Everybody just wants Bev out of the question. I agree. Probably not a chance.
No, she's a criminal judge, at least for now. And I thought I heard she was on the cusp of retirement, but no way. Also, I dare say that she would probably have a bit of a conflict because Cannoni only saw the case through a certain lens, which I didn't love that lens, but I don't think she could even correlate over to a civil judge, which happens, by the way. They shift divisions all the time in jurisdictions. I don't think she could. So nobody worry about that. And hopefully there's a non-biased, non-corrupt judge and the civil division who will handle it.
Question for Todd. Todd, how unusual is this behavior for the group of troopers? And Colleen saying it's quite disrespectful.
Yeah, a great question, Colleen Nash. You know, there's always something called groupthink. And, you know, what was stated in the trial very early on is how, and I experienced this when I was in the state fire marshal's office as an arson investigator, we worked in teams. And, you know, you go out to a scene, you don't know if it's going to be a crime scene, you know, you have an unattended death there. And, you know, you as a professional, you start your investigation and you follow the evidence. In this particular case, Nan, I think you said it early, you know, or you, Brian, you know, 16 hours into the investigation, he's ready to convict Karen Reed. You know, so if everyone was following that narrative, shame on them for not, you know, pumping the brakes, getting things back on track the way they should have been for a proper investigation.
Yeah. Aaron H., question for Nan. What about the fact that there's no accident report and going back probably to this wrongful death in the civil suit?
That's a great question. And also, so the fact that there is no accident report is an argument that can be made during the civil trial. It's not probative that there was no accident. It would show delinquency or any type of just misstep on the part of the police. Like, that's still going to be an echoing theme throughout the defense of her wrongful death action. She's going to still say the police were inept. They missed steps. They didn't pursue other avenues. There was no collision. There was no collision. There was no collision.
Right.
And had the police done a proper investigation, they would have known that. But part of their problem with investigating the quote accident was that they didn't do a police report. So it's just more evidence for a civil jury to consider.
Let's see, Todd, if Yuri's rehomed, what will be the next steps to be as far as union versus command?
Yeah, so, you know, the union there is to protect troopers and sergeants based on the structure of union protection, but they're not there to interfere in the event of any type of misconduct. So, you know, if the command staff says, you know, we're looking at, you know, these allegations, the allegations have merit and it warrants department sanctioning, then the union is not going to get in the way unless the disciplinary action is so egregious that there's no precedent setting. Then the union would step in and say, okay, as far as due process goes, you need to be fair. And here are plenty of previous examples of where there was an allegation, it had merit, and here was a disciplinary action that the department took. To go beyond that, the union won't have a say and challenge the command staff.
I love this too. I'm going to agree with Johnny Big Daddy Bows. He says, my opinion, all of them should be fired like Proctor. I agree. You know, I agree. And the way that I look at this is Yuri Bukhenik was the top guy in that text chain. Tully was in that text chain. DeChico was in that text chain. Obviously, we saw Proctor in that text chain along with friends. And you're talking about things and you're saying these awful, egregious things that first should never have been said because you're in the midst of an investigation. And you're talking about a person that's involved in this investigation. You've already now making up your mind and telling your superiors that this is the way that this is going to go and follow suit. And Yuri's not shutting it down. Tully's not shutting it down. And Proctor's allowed to continue to have this type of behavior. I don't feel it's enough here, Todd. I really don't. We can play Jenga all day long with these positions, but it's not enough because once corruption, in my opinion, seeps in, it doesn't get washed away. It will always be there, in my opinion, with these group of individuals, these troopers.
Brian, I'm going to push back. I feel that what Proctor had coming to him was inevitable. And I say that because Proctor was the mastermind. Proctor had access to the beginning stages of the investigation. It's very clear that he was the lead investigator. It was very clear that there were the inadequacies of the investigation were intentional. They weren't by mistake. The lack of reporting 5-6 months out of what came up in the trial with specific documentation that should have been reported, the handling of evidence, the control of evidence, all of that fell under Proctor's control. And while I don't disagree that Tully Proctor should have been Bukhenik should have been disciplined, I don't believe their actions warranted termination. And I say that because of the amount of control and the amount of hands-on that Proctor had compared to the others. Should they have supervised them? Yes. Did they fail to supervise him? Yes. That has its own set of punitive damages, if you will, that have less weight than what Proctor's exposure to the case was. And that's how the department's looking at it, is the weight of their exposure individually to this one case.
I'm going to respectfully push back to you, Todd.
I love it.
Those are his superiors, Todd. Those are people that manage him. You should have had an opportunity to shut this down in a few moments and said, that's not the way we're going to go on this. We're going to follow the evidence. And they chose not to do this. And I feel like these guys are going to just slip through the cracks now. Slip through the cracks, be reassigned, probably tucked away for a couple months. They'll be popping up again somewhere else and investigating. And I'm sorry, Todd, I've lost public trust. I've lost trust in these guys. I've lost trust in their ability to manage situations, to police our community. Okay. In all due respect, Todd, I'm going to push back.
Yeah, no,
Wow.
I respect that. I totally respect that. My only position is that Proctor had so much weight in the investigation, and that if you have to find a place to differentiate, you can't just land on the text messages and failure to supervise. You've got to kind of the totality of everything. Proctor's exposure was just so much greater than anyone else in the case, and I think it came back to bite Bukhenik this second time around, because Bukhenik tried to cover for Proctor.
All the more reason you should be fired then, Todd. You just made my point.
Yeah, no.
Wait,
but again, it's the weight. It's the weight of the grievance is my point. And the weight doesn't reach termination is my point.
So I have to interrupt, as I'm still trying to make myself as tall as you guys. But anyway, and I love Todd, and I mean, obviously, I know he knows what he's talking about. So do not take this, Todd, as any way discrediting your weight on your opinion with this. But I'm gonna.
We have a disagreement tonight. Look at this.
No,
we're being. Listen, I just want to let you know we're having very healthy conversation here. When we get off air, we're still friends, and yeah,
that's true.
I love this. This is great.
And I'm about to say something I don't know about. I have to defer to Todd, but I'm gonna nicely disagree for a moment. I think that, and I don't know where your chat's going because I can't see it. I think that because Bukhenik approved of, put his paws all over what Proctor did. He avowed what Proctor did, his conduct, by not calling Proctor in trial 2.0. And even a little bit in 1.0, they did call Proctor, but if you guys recall, it was set up in such a way that Bukhenik was part and parcel of everything, whether that's true or not, because I always say Proctor had his hands on everything. But Bukhenik was like, there were two of us during these interviews, the two of us did this. I don't know who signed that chain of custody form, but it would have been both of us doing these things. That's the approach that was taken in 1.0 and a little bit in 2.0. And now that Bukhenik basically said that Proctor's investigation was done with whether it was honesty or integrity. He kind of made a distinction that was ridiculous. I feel that, at least in theory, Bukhenik approved of every single thing that Proctor did. He did not throw him under the proverbial bus, and the buck stops with the goddamn supervisor. So I think from a police disciplinary standpoint and a termination standpoint, I agree with Todd, because they're probably like, okay, what specifically was Bukhenik's role, and what did he or did he not do? But a strong argument could be made that Bukhenik unfortunately made his bed on these trials and has to lie in it. So those are my
good point, Nan. Good point.
You know, I could also see where the department may have missed a step with the demotion. Failure to provide.
Of course.
That would have been an appropriate response as far as a disciplinary action. That was more than a transfer or a rehome. But again, Brian, I'm going from experience of precedent setting, discipline, how the lens of the department, how they handle those things. And that's just my firsthand experience from 24 years of being in the agency.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to hear, like, in the article, oh, and by the way, he's been demoted. Let's kick his ass down the line a little bit and put him back in check. You know, we just get a shuffle here. And look at, come on. But I think ultimately, Proctor's hands were really deep in this. And maybe he went rogue. Maybe he went rogue on those two and they didn't know. I don't know. I can't prove anything. I wasn't there, part of those discussions. I know my feelings in this, and maybe I am thinking with my feelings and not, I guess, procedure, but we're never going to really know the full story. Only those people know. And it's disappointing. It's disappointing. And I even go back to, and I'm going to bring this back in this conversation too, Brian Koberger the other day, Idaho 4 case, just ultimately admitted that he did kill the 4 Idaho students. And we're never going to hear the truth in that case too. And that's sad. I really wanted to see that play out in public court for the families in that community to hear what went on. How did this all come to be? Because that was the biggest question in that, is like, why? And we're never going to really know why. And that's why I'm glad that Karen stood up and fought back as hard as she could against the Commonwealth, the very corrupt officers in the Mass State Police, the very corrupt officers in Canton, obviously everybody inside 34 Fairview. And again, this ties us right back to the beginning of this show. And we'll end on this note with some final thoughts, but no one fought harder for John O'Keefe than Karen Reed. I mean, she did. She had to go through this to show everybody and prove to everybody, I am innocent. And it was everybody else around me that was pointing the finger in that circle at me. They were really the ones that did this. Let's end with some final thoughts. I'm going to go to Todd first. Todd, if you want to give us a final thought.
Brian, interesting. We're back on a Monday night wind up for a continuation of the Karen Reed trial. However, I don't think we're done, brother. I think we're going to be back here with more to talk about. I'm going to see Nan's beautiful smiling face again with, all of her insight. And, this trial is so unique and has brought out so many different areas of interest that we just couldn't, with a crystal ball, we couldn't foretell. So it's good dialogue, good, healthy dialogue. I love going back and forth with both of you. And again, I hope your audience enjoyed tonight.
Of course. Nan, final thought?
By the way, Todd, thank you so much. And I missed this, guys. So I mean, whether it's this case or these other cases that are percolating up there, always consider me on your dance card if you ever want to dance about these issues. I love the synergy that we have together and respect you both very much. My closing thoughts on this are, this is the best that's yet to come. You're going to see more. And the timing is notable. Proctor was out, I guess, as of March, or at least things were trending in that direction by March. I think he was terminated. You're now seeing Bukhenik and Tully had already been disciplined, not enough. I predict you're going to see Fanning, Guarino. We saw DeCicco as of today's announcement.
Devers is on a leave of absence. Devers went on leave of absence. Ruka Salts.
Quick comment on that, and I don't want to hold up your show. I might have missed it in my technological missteps today, but Dever, whatever, she out now on leave of absence, or what has she been out on leave of absence? Because that is a distinction that matters to me. I had heard that she was out on leave of absence before she even testified. If that is the case, then I'm going on record saying very respectfully that it was a little bit of a missed opportunity for the defense not to ask about that during the trial. Now, maybe they would have, and maybe it was the subject of a sidebar, or the judge in her infinite wisdom, wink, wink, wouldn't allow it. But I would have wanted, and maybe they would have tried, to let the jury hear that this woman is out on a leave of absence, which may or may not be related to any of this. I find it, I no longer believe in coincidences. So I interrupted my closing thoughts with Dever. I want to keep an eye on her. Her credibility is shot. She, in my opinion, Bukhenik, Proctor, DeCicco, Tully, I'm predicting Fanning, Guarino. These are all people who are on or are going to be on Brady Giglio lists.
Look at Todd shaking his head.
That it's only a matter of time if they're not on them already. And I'm definitely looking forward to analyzing how these mistakes in policing and the failure to properly manage these mistakes in policing affect the other matters, whether it's the notable ones like Birchmore or Walsh, or even the Tom, Dick, or Harrys, the guys and women who can't afford the best lawyers, who are getting their rights trampled upon through sham prosecutions and poor policing that are in your jurisdiction. So I am here for it. Please consider me on your dance card. And I apologize again to your audience for my internet connectivity issues.
Fine. Just to be transparent with everybody, I am going to be diving into the Brian Walsh case, and I'd love to have you guys come up and discuss some of that with me and go through the investigation and the Google searches and the blood evidence. I think we have something there, and maybe in a couple of weeks we can reconvene and do this again and talk about that. I'm going to start deep diving. I've actually been uploading all the hearings on my channel. They should be completed by next week, and you guys can all view those hearings and go through them. I had the full case file of Brian Walsh. It was handed to me, ironically enough, like 2 years ago. So I'm going to start zipping through that, and going through it and really buckling into this and nailing this case down, because I think there's a lot of segue there, from Karen Reed. Obviously, we have major players in that case as well, and I think there's a lot there that we can discuss. And I always say this, and a lot of people ask me about it, Enrique Delgado Garcia. All I say is trust the process. Trust the process. You can believe my word in that. Trust the process. We're getting there. There's a lot of things going on. Obviously, we've seen reports in the mainstream media, so trust the process. But with that being said, I want to thank both my guests this evening, retired Mass State Police Todd McGhee, the one and only attorney Nan Gallagher. And we'll do this again sometime pretty soon. I think it's always a good time having these two awesome, amazing individuals up on the panel. So can you guys chill for like 2 seconds before we go off air? I mean, when we go off air?
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, cool. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Get this damn channel to 50,000 subscribers.
Come on, guys.
Come on. Let's get there.
Press the button.
Yeah, let's get this platform. I don't care. Take out your secondary names, your third names on. Just subscribe to here, and let's get this to 50,000 subscribers. All right, everybody, we're gonna head out. Thank you all so much for spending this last hour and a half with us. I appreciate you all, and I got maybe something cooking on Wednesday, so keep your eyes out for the LTL Media channel. Might have something big here coming, but we'll talk to everybody soon. Have a great night. Bye-bye.